right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show, your one-stop shop for all things Commanders. This is season 3, episode 2 of Draft on Tap, where we get you ready for the upcoming draft and all the things that will happen along the way to get us a little closer to the action. From Hogs Haven, Ken Johannesson is with us today. Ken, how are you, buddy?
Doing well for a Wednesday. It's a cold, rainy day, so a good day to stay inside and get on a podcast.
I agree completely. You are out in Tennessee, right? How much snow do you guys get out there?
Well, last month we had an 8-inch snowfall, a little bit high for this area, but this is just a cold rain, which is kind of typical winter. So we do all right.
You love tracking the NFL, the players, and who the Commanders meet with. I think it's one of the things that most people on X know you about. Do you like tracking the players that the Commanders meet with more than tracking weather patterns?
I've been tracking weather patterns for nearly 44 years. It's just second nature doing that. The tracking players is certainly a challenge. I'm still considered, well, I consider myself a novice at it, but I have fun learning about it each and every year. So I get slightly better each year. So hopefully in about another 40 years, I'll have it down. By then, I'll be in my early 100s. And no, I won't be here, but I enjoy doing it and I enjoy the weather. So equally the same for both.
Whether either one of us are here then or not, the Commanders will still be complaining about the uniforms, I'm sure.
The uniform thing, I don't understand that argument. Um, I like the old uniforms. I like the new uniforms. Um, a lot of people know me for something that I do during the season on Sundays during the game. I do a little bit of commentary, and if a player has a good play, I'll say, "Hey, look at what Jaden Daniels just did," and I put up his jersey number and color for that particular game, and people have been drawn to that and they like it. So, hey, whatever jersey color they have for each season, I'll have it up there, but I wouldn't mind if they keep the ones they have now because building that database takes a little bit of time, but you do what you have to do.
One of the things, Ken, I wanted to talk with you today about is the All-Star games are over. The combine will be coming. The pro days will be coming. The local pro days will be coming. I mean, for guys like me and you that like the draft and the yearly grind, I mean, this is really when we're getting into the weeds right now and figuring it out. I'm curious, at the All-Star games, each team, I believe, is allowed to talk to each player, whether they choose to or not. What are you trying? What information wise, other than just names and teams, are you trying to grab when you're looking for these things?
Well, the thing that you want to focus on primarily is, are these meetings formal or informal? Because if they're on the field, after practice, they may talk to a player for 2, 3, 4 minutes, and that's an informal meeting. What were they talking about? Well, we don't know, and we may never know. The meetings that they have once the day's over or practices are over for the day is usually at the hotel rooms that they're staying at. They usually have a room designated for that, maybe more. Um, but at least they're at some facility. I know that down in Mobile for Senior Bowl, it's at the University of South Alabama, I think it is. So they have a facility for that. So the more formal meetings are in buildings like that or at the hotels. And, they probably will meet with a player no more than 15 or 20 minutes, but it's just trying to get an idea of the mindset of the player. How serious do they take football? And how do they approach each practice, each game? And what are some of the nuances they have in their preparation? and how much do they study the playbook, or are they a little bit lackadaisical about it? They're trying to, pick the brains of these players. So they'll go through a play and ask the player to diagnose it or even design a play of their own, especially quarterbacks in that regard. We've seen that, but they generally ask that of these players, and if they can demonstrate, some good skills along those lines, they'll probably get another interview. But players that are a little bit lackadaisical about such things, they may not meet with them again. Now, as far as the meetings go at each venue, whether it be the tropical bowl, I'll get it out, the hula bowl, the college gridirons showcase, which is the first one of the season in January, Senior Bowl, etc. Um, the most emphasis that Washington places on all these college all star games is the Senior Bowl. Five players last year, five, let me get my hand up here. Five players were chosen in the draft from the Senior Bowl last year. So that's probably where you want to focus. And we list all the players and who they met with and what venue. So, but still, the fans should probably focus on the Senior Bowl.
You mentioned the University of South Alabama. Shout out to Jeremy Reeves, proud Viper alumnus. We also have a great relationship with Jim Nagy, who comes on the show every year after the draft. You're right. This team has spent a lot of time at the Senior Bowl. Makes a lot of sense. Adam Peters is one of those guys that grew up like the Jim Nagy's in the scouting world, a scout first. So they know how to spend their time down there. And the Senior Bowl has really been something of a who's who across the league that shows up down there. What is the difference between the time spent, the resources as far as personnel spent on, say, the Senior Bowl compared to, let's say, Alabama versus Georgia? And what are they able to get from going to the Alabama Georgia game, let's say, and that they might not get at the Senior Bowl or vice versa?
Well, obviously, at Alabama versus Georgia or any game, Ohio State, Michigan, and so on, Southern Cal and UCLA, what they're looking for is what I compare it to is looking at game film. They're going to be looking at trends of these players. For example, if they're focused on a linebacker, how quickly can they diagnose a play? That's important for a linebacker to do, obviously. And do they cheat up to the line closer if they see it's a running play, or do they, start to drop back a little bit if they can see that it's a passing play? So they're looking for nuances in various players. Whereas at the bowl games, what people need to focus on, the average fan at the college all star games, is not the game itself, although that's important. Some players can make some extra money by playing really well in that game, but it's the practices you focus on. It's the scrimmage. When you see offensive and defensive linemen going against one another, that's one of the most popular, pieces of film that are or videos that are put on the internet, and people really focus on that. And there are players that in these practices and these, one-on-one scrimmages that are the scouts are really going to focus on, and that's why when you see in practice, at one end zone, and these players are going against each other one on one. You see dozens of people that are circled around it. Those are all those scouts, and that includes commander scouts. I know at the Senior Bowl they had 4 scouts. That's what I heard, and that also they had the front office personnel there
Right.
as well. So they had probably close to 10 people there scouting. I don't know if the owner went down there. Maybe he did, but I haven't heard one way or the other. So the Senior Bowl, yeah, they're doing that, but they do that at each college All Star game. So you know, more it's much more intense at a college All Star game for the scouts than actually going to a game. I've got a list, and I hope to publish it in a couple of days of about 14 games that they attended this year, but I know there were more, and so I'm still trying to uncover that information.
What kind of access do the scouts get to the players at the actual games, or do they get none there, and they're just there, taking notes and watching?
They're probably up in the box somewhere looking, and they really don't get access,
Okay.
to games. The access does come with the college all-star games, the combine, um, all the formal, informal meetings that typically take place anywhere from January up until well into April and right before the draft. There is a cutoff, before the draft, and I think it's roughly about 6 or 7 days in advance, so you can't have any more contact after that. So even that is, strictly monitored. But no, they just attend the games and they make notes. That's primarily what they're doing there.
Okay. Let's see. It sounds like if you listen to national media from DC to LA, the Commanders will now, and maybe rightfully so, be linked to every big name free agent that there is. And I get the why, and I get the taking advantage of a rookie contract is the buzzword that we're using for the last half a decade now. It doesn't feel like that's the Adam Peters that we've been sold on, or that any part of any of the organizations that he's been a part of, from New England to San Francisco,
Yeah.
had not particularly done it that way, particularly this early in the GM's tenure. What do you make of all the media speculation about this team and what they might do in free agency?
Well, Adam Peters, right after he was hired, did come out and say, you add free agents for need, and the draft you use to get players to help build your foundation. And that's exactly how he put it. And I can't argue that. So I look for them to be active again, but I don't think they're going to go after some of these big name free agents like people are talking, because look at a lot of the free agents from their own team they have now. They signed a number of players to 1 year contracts. Well, that's it. They play it out there 1 year, and they made it all the way to the NFC Championship game. So now you're going to have to prioritize a lot of these players. There's a number of them, and I predict that they'll bring a number of them back. And I have a list here,
Sure,
and
let's do it.
and we can get into that, shortly. But so they have to really prioritize that, and they're probably going to use the upcoming days here soon before we actually get into free agency to probably shore some of that up. I don't, there's some players they don't want to have them hit free agency. And to your earlier point in this question, there are now players around this league that want to come to play for this team. And for many years, players didn't really want to come to this team unless they knew they were going to get a massive paycheck. And that told me they didn't really care about football. They just wanted the money. Show me the money. It's a popular term in a popular movie. And so there's players out there that are a bit selfish. So you want to avoid them. So people I know are talking about players like T. Higgins, the wide receiver at Cincinnati. Now, he may really want to come here. We haven't heard anything definitive. And if that's the case, then great. But, people are saying that he's going to want a contract that's at least $30 million a year. Is Washington going to do that? I don't think so. Now, if it's closer to 25, maybe they do. Terry McLaurin is making close to that. And what I think they would have to do is adjust some players' contracts to make something like that happen. So I think if T. Higgins wants to come here, he may have to give up a little bit of money. But if he's not willing to do that, I think he'll have to go elsewhere. So I think Adam Peters is going to hold the line on how much he wants to spend, but I think he's going to be aggressive like last year, especially when it comes to our own free agents, as well as a few others that, probably will, sign with 1 year prove it deals with the idea, hopefully they would stay in Washington or move on from this point. But as far as the really big contracts, my feeling is that it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I've been on the record. I don't think, first of all, I don't think T. Higgins gets out of Cincinnati. Even if they have to tag him again, the tag would still put him in the top 5, 6
Yeah,
dollar amount wise, would get him what he wants, and then they could still work on a contract extension. I don't see that happening, and I'm totally with you. If two teams get into a bidding war, I cannot imagine Washington paying north of 30, $35 million for a wide receiver. I just don't see it. It to me, if they spent big, it would be on defense anyway. Part of the beauty to me of having Jaden Daniels is he is a guy that's going to elevate those around him. So I would be stunned. Now we can get to what we like in the draft. I would not stun me if they drafted a wide receiver in the first round. I can see that. Like to me, that's what you're doing in the first round, other than acquiring talent, is trying to sign players that in a couple of years will, so that you're not having to spend on DNs, right? Premier
yeah,
money you'd like to draft early and keep those guys. I mean, look, it's choose your poison, right? The Eagles
yeah.
decided to pay a lot of money on offense, and the majority of their defense is on rookie contracts. You just flip that around if you plan on doing that on offense. So I'm with you. The spending spree that people expect coming, I don't see. Can they've still got to flip 60% of the roster again.
Yes.
To your point about 1 year deals, this notion that they have the third most cap space in the league is correct. It's not functionally correct because they've got to replace all these players. You start spending 30 million on a guy, 40 million on Miles Garrett or whatever the extension is going to cost is a lot of money for a team that still
It
got a
is.
lot of holes to fill.
Yeah.
Fowler came out today, talked about Jeremy Chin. I think he's an interesting one. I'm sure they'd like to have him back. I wonder if that's the guy that will have enough suitors that money gets too high.
You know, I've seen these reports and some of the speculation as well. How much does he want to be here? Um, I
And don't forget, this is his first opportunity to get a big contract, right?
yeah,
He got out the rookie deal, got the 1 year contract here. So, and this is his first opportunity to get paid.
let's say Washington offers him a 3 year deal, 8 million a year, $24 million. I think that might be pretty fair for him. I mean, yeah, as toward the end of the season, he was lights out, good. But earlier in the season, I think he was trying to feel his way around this defense and trying to fit in, and he did. You could see him slowly progressing. So I could see a contract like that. But what if another team comes with a $36 million contract over 3 years? That's 12 million a year. That's 50% more. So how much do you want it, or how much do you want to be with the team that may have, you know, the Super Bowl window opening now? So it depends on what he wants. I can see that. So I think I could see it going either way with him. I hope he stays. I think he's a up and coming player. Well, I don't think he's up and coming. I would say he's up and coming in this defense.
Yeah.
And I think that might work in Washington's favor, but we'll see.
You said you have a list there. Who do you like to remain?
Well, just real quick, like I want to go through before I get to the ones I want to keep, the ones I think that are going. I think Ben St. Juste is gone.
Yep.
Michael Davis definitely gone.
Yep.
Jerry, this is might be a little bit surprised, but I think that the team will move on from Jeremy McNichols at running back because I think they're going to revamp that running back room. Um,
I agree. And they need to.
yes, I really need my glasses. So Percy Butler is another one that I have that I think they'll move on, but they might keep him for depth. So, don't.
I think it's about a 3.5 million cap saving on him. Is that
Yeah,
right?
it would be, and that's kind of important. It depends on what they might see out there in free agency or in the draft, but I think he's on the bubble. Um, I think Dominique Hampton, who would be a second year player, was a draft pick last year. It
Yep.
seems like he never fit in. I mean, they tried, and he played a little bit early on, but he just more or less disappeared. I think the team moves on from him, or at the very least, he goes to the practice squad. I think Cornelius Lucas getting a little bit old now, but I have him as a bubble player. I think it goes either way. Um, the same for Jamison Crowder, but he made some clutch plays as the season went on. So that's 50-50. KJ Osborne, nothing happened there. So
Yep.
I think they move on from him. The two kickers, Austin Seibert, Zane Gonzalez, I think they look for new blood there. Michael Walker at linebacker, he provided some decent depth this year, so I could see that either way. Michael Dieter, offensive line, I think there's a chance they move on from him.
Yep.
I mean, he was good for depth this year, so that was good. So those are some of the names I have. But now the ones I think that they're going to keep, Noah Igbenogany. I
Yep.
think he had a pretty good season. Maybe not the greatest, but I think he's good for depth. Now,
Real quick before you move on, Noah's an interesting one to me because I think he proved that he can be a starting nickel in the league. And I
yeah,
don't know about you, but I think after watching Cooper DeJean in the Super Bowl, it reminds me at least of why they drafted Sainris Drill. And it
yes,
was not to play boundary, it was to be in there in that nickel, which frankly is becoming one of the more important positions on the field. Will Noah Igbenogany want to come back to be the second string nickel on this team? I think would be interesting.
yeah, we'll see. We'll see if he gets any offers. So, but anyway, now one I have 50-50, but leaning slightly toward keeping him is Cleveland Farrell, defensive end, edge.
Okay.
Um, he has a good bull rush, but he doesn't have a good spin move or something or things like that. I mean, he just comes straight at you, and he's pretty good at it. But sometimes he over pursues. So, um, will they find another edge in free agency or other draft? I think that's a real possibility. Do they bring Farrell back? I'm 50-50 on it, but I lean toward they may.
They definitely need more juice at the edge.
Yes, they do. Absolutely. Um, Nick Bullor, special teams. Uh,
Mhm.
Slow start to season, but then he became a special teams ace. I think they bring him back on another 1 year deal, and I think he'll be happy to stay. Dante Fowler, I could see him returning on a 3 year deal, but he may get something elsewhere. I kind of doubt it. He has a little bit of a history there of behavioral issues.
Well,
But
I think he's a Dan Quinn guy, right? It
he
feels
is
like he'll follow Dan
absolutely.
Quinn to the depths of hell somewhere. So,
Yeah, so I tend to think he stays. He's another candidate, I think, for a 3 year deal. And by the way, with a lot of these 3 year deals that I'm just simply throwing out there,
yeah.
I think technically they will be 4 year deals, but with the fourth year being a void year to
Okay.
help with cap hits. Um, Now, Bobby Wagner, I just put him in the middle here. I think he comes back. And I think he comes back because he's another Dan Quinn guy, first of all. And I think he has come to really like it here. And he and Jaden Daniels have established a rapport with one another.
Yeah.
And I think Jaden Daniels, one of the reasons for his success this year, strangely enough, has been Bobby Wagner. And you can see the friendship that they've developed. So,
It was amazing, Ken, to see how many guys, coaches, players alike said that when they got to Washington, it like re-sparked their love for the game.
yeah.
And that can't be overstated in my mind.
Yes, and that I think is what is definitely making Washington a very attractive situation. You know, they have a quarterback that's quickly becoming one of the best in the league. Now, here's an obvious one that who's going to come back. Trust Way, the punter. Yes, he's
Sure.
a free agent, but you know he's coming back. I mean, he's the longest tenured player of this team right now, and
Yes.
that's going to continue. I think Marcus Mariota does come back. I
He's an
think,
interesting one to me.
yeah,
I talked about him the other day. Uh, I'm sure he'd love to start again, and maybe he'll get an opportunity. I can see Oakland, New York. Maybe there are a couple of spots where he could fit in.
yeah,
If he doesn't, I'd love to have him back. The price tag's a little high. You probably have to make him one of the higher paid backups in the league. But
yeah.
I think he was extremely valuable to what they had going on this year and capable of winning you a game if needs to be. He proved that this year. Not every backup can go in and do that. So I think he's a necessary piece to bring back if he wants.
Yeah, and he also has a strong rapport with Jaden
That's
Daniels,
right.
and I think that's something that's going to really work in the team's favor. Now we've already talked about Jeremy Chin, so I won't do that. I just think he does return, and I know the team will want him to return. Uh, Before I get to the last one, I want to do these three, and they're all wide receivers: De'Ami Brown, Olamide Zacchaeus, and Noah Brown. I think they bring back all three because all three established a relationship with Jaden Daniels, and he liked all three of them as targets. And I think they improve with him next year. We hope that Noah Brown can stay healthy. Well, we hope all three can stay
No,
healthy.
that's right. Noah Brown was on pace for 700 yards before he got hurt.
Yeah. And, Olamide Zacchaeus provided some clutch moments this year. The numbers are not massive or anything, but some clutch moments. And that's, I think, bodes well for him. De'Ami Brown, you know, for the longest time, we wondered if he would get it. I think he's getting it. And that catch against the Detroit Lions, near the 5 yard line,
Yeah.
where he has a hand over his eyes, that was concentration. And that is what he has become in this offense. And I think Jaden Daniels will target him more and more next year. So I can see this is another player who I
He
think,
might have gotten priced out for us too, though.
yeah,
He made himself some money at the end of the
yeah,
year.
he did. But I think
And
he's a
I'd like
candidate.
him back
Yeah,
personally.
but I think he's a candidate for a 4 year deal. So we'll see. We'll see. Now, the last player I have on here, Zach Ertz.
Yep.
Um, I, I know that he's going to be 35 years old, but he's still doing what he's best at. That's catching the ball. He's not going all the way down the field. He's not going to get you 25 or 30 yards pass catch, maybe once or twice a year. But overall, he's going to be a guy that moved the chains, get you 8 to 12 yards when it's needed. He's very dependable. 66 catches this year. When we go back to August, most of us were thinking if he can get 3 or 4 games in and provide us with some good moments in that regard before he gets injured, then okay. But he is with the team the whole season. 66 catches, 7 touchdowns. Um, provided the winning touchdown against Atlanta, and I think this is a guy you bring back, and he wants to be back. So that's the list there of our own free agents, and there will be others that will sign minimum deals and so forth, but some of them will not be back. Now, another one that I want to mention in all of this is Derek Forrest. I
Okay.
just don't I just don't see him coming back.
No, me
Uh,
neither.
but that first year, that first season, he was incredible. 5th round pick. Well, it's actually his second season because he sat on the bench his first
Yeah.
year. Ugh. Anyway, sorry about that.
No, you're good.
I really think that uh, the team's just going to move on from Derek Forrest. An amazing second season when we weren't expecting anything out of him. Um, and provided us some memorable moments that year. But after that, things started not to work. It wasn't working out for him. And this year, you saw him on special teams on occasion, and you saw him get on the field a little bit, but just no impact whatsoever. So I know he's a little bit of a fan favorite, but I just think the team moves on for him.
You missed one that I had on my mind, and it's from the tight end room. I hope that they bring John Bates back, not because I'm the leader of the John Bates fan club, which I am, but really, I mean, I think probably one of the top 5 blocking tight ends in the league, better hands than given credit for. It's not what they use him for. I would like to see him back immensely, and I'm with you. I don't see how you could go into next year without Zach Ertz there, who literally caught everything to move the chains this year. Anytime Jaden Daniels needed to go somewhere with the ball, he found a way to get open. You're right. No yak Zach, as Nick Ackridge likes to call him. But I mean, gets open and catches everything. So I actually like the tight end room more than I think the fan base does, because we still haven't seen what Ben Sinnott is. And I think it's important to remind people that tight end might be one of the hardest positions to transfer from college to the pros. And really, they weren't even using him like that. They were using him more as an H-back anyway, which limited some of his usage. So I actually like the 3 tight ends that they could have if they brought the 2 back.
Yeah, I didn't know Bates, his contract was running out. I thought he had another year.
He might. I thought he was up. I thought he got drafted with Forrest.
Yeah, okay. Um, well, it doesn't matter. I think that he does return if his contract is running out. If not, I don't think the team gets rid of him. I mean, just the blocking alone, it's amazing. I mean, he's like another offensive lineman when he's out there, and then he'll occasionally slip out of there, and
Yep.
he'll be, here's a guy that once in a while that will give you a 16 or 18-yard reception, and definitely move the chains. So yeah, he's good for about 15 catches or so a season, but usually they're clutch receptions. So I think I don't think he's going anywhere.
We talk about wide receiver position on the team. Does the scheme and the quarterback lessen the importance of the position on this team?
Oh, well, you know, um, the quarterback wide receiver relationship is one of the most important in the NFL, especially on offense. And you have to have that rapport. And if you bring in a new player, you know, you have to kind of reshuffle everything. That's why, I have my concerns about bringing in a T. Higgins, trading for a Brandon Ayuk, um, or bringing in another player. Now, drafting someone, I understand because you can work that player into the room. But, if you add a free agent wide receiver, they're going to bring some of their stuff that they did at another location and say, well, this is how we did it over there. Well, no, this is Washington. Yeah, you could probably in the past bring some things to the table, but we're at a point now with this team that things are the way they are. We have the quarterback that we have, and he'll be around for the next decade plus. And the wide receiver room, I think, is pretty set if you bring back the 3 players that I mentioned. And don't forget about Luke McCaffrey. I think is going to be an up and come. I think he has a good second season, but look out for him by the 3rd year. So, you know, I, I'm not in favor of bringing in a free agent wide receiver this year, provided that we do sign all these players that are that've been on the roster this past year. But if De'Ami Brown goes elsewhere or one of the others, then yeah, we're going to have to probably bring in a free agent wide receiver. But I'm still not in favor of bringing in a big name and big money, let's do the draft. There's a player there in the DMV, wide receiver, who I think is going to be very good in the NFL. I
Ty
think
Felton.
Washington, huh?
Ty Felton.
That's exactly who I'm thinking of at
Yep.
Maryland. And I think they could draft him, in the middle rounds.
Yep.
And I think he's going to be a good pro. I think he's underrated only because he played for Maryland. That's not a knock against Maryland, but they're not in the upper tier of other Big Ten teams and comparable SEC teams.
Yeah.
But he's a good player, and so I could see Washington bringing in someone like him, maybe someone like Tez Johnson from Oregon,
Yep.
who's a speedster, who kind of reminds me of Tyreek Hill and some of these speedy, kind of slender receivers who are just dynamic. So I could see a player like that, stretching the field. So yeah, the dynamic for is fascinating to me, and it's a good point that you bring up. So they've got to continue to get this right, and that's why I am advocating for bringing back the two Browns, and obviously you want to bring back Zach Ertz. No one disputes that. And I mean, even would they consider bringing back Jamison Crowder? I mean, I wouldn't rule it out, but I do think they move on from him. So, and Zacchaeus, I don't want to forget him.
And a name I like in free agency is Amari Cooper. I think
Yep.
the money's right for Cooper. I think he probably fits what it is to be a commander. He probably fits seamlessly into that group there.
Yeah, he could. I mean,
Is the D tackle is the Alabama D tackle experiment over? Can they run it back? Here's the problem: if you don't run it back with those two guys, if you don't add an extra year or something to get Allen's contract number down, but if you did that, if you lose Allen and basically they can't move Payne this year without taking some ridiculous cap hit, that makes them worse. No matter how you kind of look at it, if they're in win now mode, does getting rid of one of those D tackles make you any better?
I don't think so. I really think that something John Keim hinted at today is that they could restructure John Allen's contract, and I think he would be receptive to that. And you'd add in a year or two, but you kind of make some of that void, so and lower that cap head a bit. But here's an interesting thing, and I'll go through that list here in a little bit. But one of the positions that they have met with in the pre-draft process so far is defensive tackles, more than defensive ends and edge rushers. That tells you something. And there is more and more of an emphasis over the last year or two of defensive tackles, with the Eagles having so much success, in the middle. And they have a Georgia guy, right?
Two of them.
Two of them. Yeah. No, that's right.
Three of them if you include Nolan Smith on the edge.
Well, yeah. So I think teams are looking at that. And I think the Washington Commanders are one of them because they certainly did it last year. Surprised all of us when, in the second round. So I'm not ruling out, something happening in the second or third round with a defensive tackle, given that they've met with a number of them so far, and I think they'll meet with more. Now, is it going to be in the early rounds or middle rounds or what have you? I think one will be drafted. Do they add one in free agency? Probably not, because I don't think there will be too many available. So, keep an eye on that.
If talent isn't the discrepancy, what position should they be targeting in the first round?
I'm going to mix this up a little bit.
All right.
But I'm going to put it in a certain context here. I think the team is going to try to trade down into the second round. whether it's early part of the round or middle part of the round, but not lower than that. And usually there are teams that want to get to about where Washington is, anywhere from 27th to about 31st. That's kind of a sweet spot. So Washington is fortunate to be there. And some of these teams are looking to move up. They'll see a player that's maybe dropped a little bit, and it may not. It'll be a player that's not necessarily on Washington's radar. And so another team will pop up and say, we'd like to trade. You can have our second rounder. We'll give you our third and maybe, a fifth or sixth rounder, as compensation. Washington takes that. So I think that could happen. But even if they do drop a little bit or stay with that first round pick, I think it's going to be between offensive line and defensive line. And when they get to that pick, they're going to look at the best player of those positions, and they'll choose accordingly. It could be offensive tackle, say Essery of Minnesota. I think he could be a target. But there's some good defensive tackles there. I think that'll be available in that general area. So will it be better than, say, an offensive tackle? So I don't think it's going to be a wide receiver, but it could be if, say, two of those three wide receivers I talked about earlier, sign with other teams. So wide receiver could move up substantially in the draft. So I look for either side, offensive, defensive line, or an extenuating circumstance where they take a wide receiver. But if they keep with those three, then if they don't like what they see on offensive, defensive line, and if Siobhan Ravel is there, is that who it is? I'm
Yes,
thinking
from ECU.
from ECU,
Yep.
cornerback.
Yep.
They could, take him, and I think that would be a great selection. So I guess my order would be offensive or defensive line equal, cornerback, and then wide receiver, depending on the circumstances.
The power play that Adam Peters made by signing Marshawn Lattimore really allowed him to go into this offseason being able to take best player available. Don't get me wrong. I mean, why cornerback 2 is a definite need. They don't even have one on the team right now, particularly in your mock free agency there, where they don't bring back St. Juice, where I actually think he's an option to bring back as your backup to the backup kind of situation.
Sure.
But they need somebody else on the boundary. I just do not think that now obviously they're going to do some things in free agency. So maybe they get it shored up there and then they spend some money on that position there. But they desperately need that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let
Go
me
ahead. Yep.
do one thing real quick. Like we'll just go through this list, and that's potential free agent signings. And then I think this will answer your question about cornerback. I do have T. Higgins on the list, but I just think that's a long shot. Talanoa Hufanga of San Francisco safety. I think he's a possibility. I have an edge rusher here, Aziz Elijah Jerry.
Zizo Jalari, yes, former
Ojolari.
Georgia Bulldog, yes, from the
Man,
Giants, right? Yeah.
me and pronunciation with these names. If I have my own players on my own team, I'm good. But
That's right.
I can learn pretty good though. But for
Yeah.
now, they're not on the team. So I'm Terrell Dotson, linebacker, Dolphins. I could see him as a possibility. Now, one that I have, he struggled a little bit with injuries and the like, is Jedrick Wills of Cleveland, offensive
Yes.
tackle. He could sign a prove it deal. I think he's a really good player, and I think you would bring him in for 1 year, 1 year prove it deal
Yeah.
contract to be the replacement if Sam Cosmi doesn't play next year, which I think is very possible. Now, the final player I have on this list, and it's not a long one, is Christian Fulton, cornerback
Yes.
for San Diego Chargers. Um, now he
He a
didn't have
former Tech? Is he a former Hokie?
he might be.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I think so. But Fulton is a player has a slow start to his career, but this past season had a really good year. So he may want a 1 year prove it deal, for $3.5–4 million. So I think that's a cornerback that could, be a stopgap if you needed that. So I would say that he's a possibility as well.
If the Ravens don't bring back Ronnie Stanley, is he intriguing to you?
Oh my goodness, yes,
You get to kick
yeah,
Coleman into guard where he's probably better suited to play.
yep, yeah. I mean, uh, just that signing alone would almost rearrange the whole line if you think about it.
Sure.
Um, and talking about Wills bringing him for a 1 year prove it deal to maybe I would say you would want to put Wills though on the outside at right tackle, and then kick Andrew Wiley to guard, which I think he would be better there. Where
Particular to your point, if Cosme's not going to be back
yeah,
anytime soon.
yeah, and of course um, like Kyle says from the Burgundy Zone, the center, he calls him Tyler Badass,
Yes.
and he is. And so I think he stays. But although I would like to see some depth at center, nothing against Michael Dieter. I just think they need
I
depth.
agree.
I can see a pick in the late rounds, and there'll be some good ones out there. So I could see just one or two moves, and it's almost like you reshuffle the whole line for the better.
If you're sitting there at 29 and the receivers that you like in that range are gone, and the tackles are some of these guys that might could play tackle in the league, but probably are guards, which I'm totally done with in that regards. If the D tackle that you like is gone, the two or three premier edges are gone, and you can't find a trade out partner. If a guy like Omarion Hampton is sitting there and you like him as the second best receiver, and you think he's one of these dynamic, rip your heart out on any play type of running backs, can you force yourself? Can you commit yourself to taking a running back at the bottom of the first round?
Well, if it comes to that, I'm going to trust Adam Peters
Yes.
because after year one, I mean, look what happened with this team. So in his first year, he chose and he chose well, as Master Yoda would say, you chose well. And so uh, I trust him to make that decision. And you bring in that North Carolina run back who is quite dynamic, and I think he's going to have a very good career. But the thing about running backs, they're good for about 4 or 5 years. After that, the tread wears down. I could see Saquon Barkley having another great year. Beyond that, who knows? I mean, the bottom falls out quickly. So when you choose those players, choose wisely, but with the idea, you're probably not going to sign that guy to a second contract. Brian Robinson was unreal for the first couple of years here.
Yep.
But is he going to be on the team next year? I mean, that's a legitimate question.
It is.
And yeah, and like I said, I think the team moves on from Jeremy McNichols. I think they do bring back Austin Eckler because he's much more dynamic in the receiving game,
Yeah.
but he will provide some good carries for you. Chris Rodriguez, you know, um, I think he stays around, but how much would he play? How much playing time does he see? I mean, when he's out there, it seems like he does a good job. So, maybe he spends the off season, really working out and learning the position even more. So I don't rule him, sticking around. But I could see two new players at running back, this coming season. And if it gets to the point where all the good players have been taken that you had targeted or wanted to target, yeah, you take that running back. There's no question.
They've got to get more explosive at the position. I just Brian Robinson is a great story, and maybe you've got it figured out. I'm not exactly sure how Brian Robinson went from leading the league in yards after contact the first 5 games of the season to I think averaging
Yeah.
3.2 yards per carry, maybe less for the second half of the season. You just can't go into next year with that kind of production. Their running game should be the easiest part of the whole thing when you have a Jaden Daniels back there, and the fact that they just couldn't get it working, I don't think was a Cliff Kingsbury thing. I just don't think that Brian Robinson has the extra juice that you need in the current NFL. I think there's an upgrade needed there. You mentioned about, and we talk about this all the time on the show, about how many hits, singles, if we're talking baseball, that AP kind of slapped around this year. It will be hard for him to duplicate what he did this last year, just simply because he didn't miss one.
Well, yeah, and you have to take into account Washington is not going to have a last place schedule now. They're going to have a second place schedule.
Yep.
And if you look at the teams that are playing next year, it's going to be a tougher schedule. And I think a successful season will be 10-7. And people are going to say, they were 12-5 the year before. What happened? And the fans may kind of, complain a little bit. But they need to remember last year, as incredible as it was, there were a lot of last second victories.
A lot.
And thank goodness Jaden Daniels was the quarterback to make that happen. And so could it happen again next year? Absolutely, because Jaden is that good. But you can't depend on that. You're going to need to, do what they did in Detroit. Go in there, blow them out. Even though yeah, they had plenty of injuries. No one denies that. But look, a week later, look what happened. I mean, they're blown out by Philadelphia. Philadelphia was the best team, in the playoffs and really throughout much of the season. And
Best
so,
roster in the league.
yeah, and you had some turnovers and all that, but give Philadelphia credit. I mean, you have to. So, I think that 10-7, maybe 11-6 is a realistic expectation next year. But people are going to say, "Oh, that's not good." But make the playoffs. That's all you have to do because
Mhm.
once you make the playoffs, anything can happen. And Washington proved that this year. And I think back to the Green Bay Packers when Aaron Rodgers was there. I think it was back in 2010 or so. Yeah, they were sixth seed. There was no seventh seed, but they were the number 6 seed, the last seed. They won all 3 games on the road, got the Super Bowl, and they won it. All you have to do is get there, and teams have proven that once you get there, you can you can win it all. The New York Giants proved it twice in the last 15 years when
Is
they
Eli
went up.
is Eli Manning a Hall of Fame quarterback?
Oh, I shouldn't have mentioned this. No,
You did,
but
so I had to ask.
no, no. Let me qualify that. In the short term, no. In the long term, probably so. You win two Super Bowls, and you did it against Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Yeah, you're probably going to be in the Hall of Fame, and I think eventually he does deserve it. So I'm going to put that out there. But
He's a 500 quarterback
he's
with
a
no
500.
All Pros and a couple of no records.
Yeah, but they're players in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You can look at the stats,
Sure.
and they're there, but it's because of certain plays. Lynn Swan is a good example. His stats, they're good, but they're not like Hall of Fame. But he had like 2 or 3 catches in various Super Bowls, for the Steelers back in the 70s. And that's what got him in the Hall of
Yeah.
Fame. Not to take anything away from Lynn Swan, good player, but not a great player. And that's what happens. You know, Players create these moments in the Super Bowl, and more often than not, that gets them and then into the Hall of Fame.
Ken, I'd like to get out of here on this. I posted a video on my X feed earlier today, and it was from an interview that Jaden Daniels did um, with Kevin. What's his name from Omaha Productions? Kevin Cole, is that his name? At any
Yeah,
rate, yeah.
yeah,
Um, he said he asked him about what helped him production wise, kind of each year of his career in college. And one of the big things he mentioned was be the second year, going from year one to year two at LSU. He had a full off season with all of the receivers there and all the rest of the offense, and he had a full off season in the playbook, the same playbook. And it got me to thinking about Washington and how fortunate that they are that everybody on staff is coming back. Everybody in the front office is coming back. It feels like getting everybody back for year two. Probably won't happen year three, but for year two, it feels really big.
yeah. It's a good point, and I admittedly I didn't think about that. And if anyone can make a jump from what was an incredible, quote unquote freshman season, it's Jaden Daniels, and give him the players that he needs on both sides of the ball, and he'll do it. So I'm going to stick with that 10-7, possibly 11-6 prediction. But based on what you're saying, I wouldn't put out I wouldn't put it past that team going 14-3 next year and challenging Philly for the division. If they can do that, they have a shot next year.
Ken, I appreciate you. Everybody can check Ken's work at Hog Haven. And I always enjoy our time together. So I appreciate you giving me almost an hour of it today. You're the best, buddy. I thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. I appreciate all the things you do for the fans. Your podcast is something I watch every week. And now I get to watch myself and critique myself. I'm my own worst critic. So it's been really a pleasure to be with you today and chat about this team. The future is bright, Doug. I'm telling you, it really is. And for many years, the fans have suffered. But we're in good hands now. And we have a lot to look forward to.
Thank
So
you, Josh
thanks for,
Harris, and thank you, Adam Peters.
yes. So
And
thanks for inviting me today. I've really enjoyed it.
we'll do it again soon. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks.